Next.
I'm sorry, Steve, could you please introduce yourself and give us a short overview of your organization?
I will do. As I said, as Joe actually said, I'm the president and CEO of U.S.VETS. I've been with the organization since the beginning. We took our first veterans in housing in 1993 in Los Angeles. Worked with the VA, who had a revolving door of veterans coming in and out of their substance abuse treatment and mental health programs. Our organization was started by a World War II combat Marine. We bought our first building in 92. First 5 veterans came in 93. Since then, that site has grown into about 650 veterans, and we've added 10 more. So we have 11 sites across the country, providing housing for more than 3,000 veterans every night. In addition, we work with the VA on their supportive service for veteran families program, and work with veterans and their families out in the community. So we serve about 2,500 annually through that program. Early on, we decided we needed wraparound services. So we do case management, mental health counseling, employment assistance. We put more than 1,000 guys back to work, men and women back to work last year. And at each of our sites, we create a therapeutic community. Because they're large, some of our largest sites are 500 and 600 veterans. It's really important that we engage them in their own rehabilitation, whether that be from substance abuse, homelessness, mental health, and they look after each other. If we don't hear from someone for a while, it is likely as not that another veteran's going to come and say, "Hey, Joe's missing. I haven't seen him in a few days. Where is he?" And this empowers them to really help them move forward. We've created a number of specialty programs, post 9/11 programs, women programs. We're the largest provider of services for women veterans in the country. Our Long Beach site started 20 plus years ago, has a military sexual trauma treatment program within it. And we've since expanded that, knowing that a couple of years ago, we found out that the suicide rate among women was very, very high among women veterans. And that a lot of them aren't going to the VA. 2/3 of them are not going to access services at the VA because they feel it's a male bastion. So we started a digital platform reaching out to women veterans and providing mental health counseling. We provided counseling to over 400 women at this point. So it really has touched a nerve in that community, and we're hoping to expand that across the country. We're really adding to our residential services. We're working on 2 areas: homeless prevention, hoping to prevent veterans from becoming homeless in the first place through mental health, through employment, through the aforementioned Women Vets on Point program. And on the other end, there's a dramatic need for affordable housing. A lot of veterans and other homeless people today are homeless because they can't afford housing. There are working homeless out there. So we're engaged in about 8 different projects that will create more than 500 units of permanent housing, ranging from Phoenix to Riverside to Ventura. And the largest project we're involved in is the West Los Angeles VA. We were awarded the RFP on that, about on the 180 acres of land there, along with 2 other partners. And we'll create 1,600 units of permanent supportive housing for veterans over the next 10 years. This is a problem that's not going to go away. We are really worried about what's going to happen once the country opens back up. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people have lost their housing. So we really need to be prepared for the onslaught that we fear is coming.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. Susie, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your center?
Yes. Hi, I'm Susie Loving. My husband is a retired Marine colonel who was in Vietnam 3 tours of duty, and this was his idea originally. And we have been doing this now for almost 10 years, just quite under 10 years. We are much smaller. We have a 40-bed facility, and we take veterans who want to make a change in their life, who have fallen down on their luck, who have drug and alcohol addictions, or any type of mental, health problem, depression, lack of jobs, everything. We will take them as long as they want to make the change, because we are pretty strict. Being small, we have a small staff. I envy Steve, but anyway, or maybe I don't envy him. We work with our people on an individual basis. They come in, they must have an honorable or general under honorable discharge. They meet with our mental health counselor for an assessment before we take them. And then from that assessment, we then lay out a plan for them to get back into independent living. We don't put a timeline on any, on each person. I mean, I should say each person gets their own timeline, and we work with them, be it a year, be it 2 years. It's very difficult to get a heroin addict back into the world safely in less than 18 months to 2 years. I mean, I'm being totally honest with you. You think you can, then you're fooling yourself, okay? Because we see them come back if we try. Each veteran has their own room. They're very lovely. We provide everything. We have a chef who cooks meals for them. We have food closet. We try to get them not only mental health counseling from the VA, but we have 2 mental health counselors that work with them here, as well as my case manager, and we individualize it as much as possible. They're asked eventually to go back to work or to go back to school because they have fabulous benefits, and a lot of them have, forgotten that, or don't even know they have the benefits. Right, that's the sad part. Right now, we have, interestingly enough, about 5 or 6 veterans who were in Iraq in the early 2000s who have just wandered in, I mean, for lack of better words, and who've made a mess of their lives. And that's what we're working with. They obviously have mental issues from the war, PTSD, etc. And so we're trying to get them back on, back into independent living. And it does take time. Let's see, Amanda, can you add anything? I mean, we try to do for them what anyone would do for, their own family. And actually, we've been knocked around because they say that we're too mom and pop, but we're also very strict. I mean, we don't, one bad apple can ruin the whole bunch. So we do not take very many, people who cause us problems. We give them a chance, and if they can't do it, then they have to leave. That's just the way it is, I mean, and it scares you to think that you do that, but in the end, they usually end up coming back and being successful. Yes. Okay, that's the good news. But you just got to do it. The reason they went in the service and loved the service was because of the discipline, and that's the big one. You have to be disciplined, right? And that's it. I don't know. I can tell you more, but that's it. I'm not very good at it.
Thank you so much. I see we're just joined by Mr. Noel Gunther, who's with WETA TV. So welcome, Noel. Thanks for showing up today. We have Steve Peck from U.S.VETS here. He's the CEO, and Susie Loving, who's the Chief Admin Officer over at 5 Star Veterans Center down in Jacksonville. Steve, you wanted to talk a little bit about how COVID has accelerated some of the challenges in providing services to veterans experiencing homelessness. So could you describe, like, what are you seeing within your system as far as the impact of the virus and the pandemic?
Well, it's had a pretty dramatic impact on us as it has everywhere else. One impact is that a lot of so we have 2 kinds of beds: transitional housing, which are rehabilitation beds. Guys who need a lot of mental health, substance abuse, education assistance, etc. And they live in 2 or 3 person rooms. And then we have our permanent housing, and those are individual rooms. During COVID, a lot of veterans are not wanting to come into a congregate living situation. So the number of those beds that are where veterans are living now are pretty dramatically reduced. There are other options, though. So most communities have either rented or bought motels, and they're putting veterans and other homeless people in those motels to isolate them. So a number of our veterans are out in the community. Now that the VA has raised its rate to allow us to keep going. We financially, we couldn't operate on a 60% occupancy rate. So that all is going to come to an end at some point. toward the end of this year. We're not quite sure what's going to happen after that. We know we locked down early. We were locked down first week of March. We're practicing social distancing, masks. We have skeleton crews on there just to provide the services that veterans are needing. We've dramatically increased our telehealth. We're trying to do everything we can to reach out to veterans through telehealth, through the phone. If they don't have a phone, we can give them a phone. But it's been very challenging. Vulnerable veterans who are struggling in their lives do not do well in isolation. So we really are doing everything we can to reach out to them. And as I said, prepare for what's coming next. It's hard to tell financially what's going to happen once all of the CARES money goes away. Hard to tell how many people how much the homeless population has increased. We don't really know that because so many communities have, as I said, gotten these hotels and put a lot of veterans and other homeless people into housing. But that will come to an end. So we're kind of bracing ourselves for what's going to come next.
Susie, are you seeing similar impacts? Like, how has the pandemic affected you?
The same thing in many ways. One problem we have is that the telehealth is great and it does help, but it's not the same as one-on-one. You know, they can see our counselors one-on-one, but because, you know, the COVID, the VA has gone to telehealth. And the next thing is we had trouble. We used to have them going to events. There are no events anymore. You know, we send them to the beach. We send them to any place we can to reintegrate them so that they meet other people. We've been very fortunate so far this year, knock on wood, we've not had any COVID problems here at all. And thank goodness, but it's just so sad because you see people just wandering around and they don't know what to do and, you know, they can't go anywhere. So mental health has become very, very difficult. We're constantly thinking of ways to keep them busy, whether they like it or not. Okay, I mean, you know, because you have to, or there'll be more problems. Florida's lucky because we are more open than other states. So they can now go to the beaches. They can go, you know, to, well, they just started hockey again. They can go to football games because nobody else wants to go. So they give us the tickets, I guess, you know, even though they can only have 25% seating, our guys love it because it's something to do. And that's the sad part. Fortunately, we're very blessed. We have a lot of people in this city who really care about veterans. This is probably the most veteran friendly city I've ever lived in. And so that kind of tells you, but being a Marine family, but these people will reach out and they find jobs for these people, which is great because that gets them, you know, interested in doing other things. Okay? But that's, yeah, we're in the same boat. He's much larger, but we're in the same boat.
Excellent. No, thank you. And before I open it up to questions from the press, Mr. Vincent, you wanted to talk quickly about U.S.VETS. You've been doing some work, especially on the challenges of equity and issues of race when working to solve the problem of veteran homelessness. Can you talk about how U.S.VETS is addressing that? I mean, we've seen a national, that's moved to the forefront of the national conversation, especially this summer with the death of George Floyd, and a lot of organizations to include Wounded Warrior Project speaking out about that. So could you tell us how does U.S.VETS look at that?
Thank you. The reality is that when the murder of George Floyd took place, it really put a name and a face to what was going on in the country, unfortunately, in different places. And it was allowed us, we thought that the first thing we needed to do as social workers and agencies that is serving veterans that face the same discrimination and inequities that anyone else would, we had to first just address it. We had to be able to acknowledge it without any ambiguity, without anyone feeling at guilt, when no one taking necessarily the fault, but everyone taking responsibility of how we solve this. No minority can overcome the injustices of the majority without the majority helping. So it's about the allies working together and not being separated. What brings us together, not what pulls us apart. We had to first establish that not everyone had the same viewpoint, not everyone came from the same culture, not everyone comes from the same geographic or socioeconomic conditions. We all have differences and we should embrace those differences. And it wasn't a Democratic or Republican issue, a black or a white issue, or a man or a woman issue. It was a human issue. And how do we sit at the table and talk about it? So we allowed our staff to sit and talk about it. We allowed them to sit with each other, because sometimes we forget that the staff, when we say services, people have to deliver those services. That's the staff. And if the staff is affected, it affects the clients and it affects the veterans. So we first wanted the staff to talk about it, to have open, honest conversations about what feelings it brought up. Now, in some of our sites, it was less of a problem. In Hawaii, multicultural, it didn't hit. But then we have sites that are in Inglewood, California, where there were riots going on, and it was impacting people's mental health. So we had to be able to offer mental health services and address it and say, there's not an accident that over half the veterans that we serve that are homeless are of color. Yet that's extremely disproportionate to the total amount of veterans. That's due to historical things that we need to address. How do we address them? We first address them by coming together and not placing blame. We first address them by acknowledging and saying it does exist. Then we say social equity versus equality. We do agree everyone should be treated the same, but people should also be treated according to their circumstances, much like we do in clinical world. So we have to make sure that people are getting equal access and opportunity. And we have to partner with agencies that are doing that in a productive way. How do we make sure that we are having not only having equal access and opportunity, but our staff must resemble that. We must have diversity amongst our staff. We must have people in positions of authority that are minorities. This includes women, people of color, no matter what minority it is, because veterans relate to all these things. And no matter what we disagree on politically, we all don't have to agree. We can support different candidates. We can have different viewpoints based on where we grow up. What we all agree on is veterans deserve to have equal access to care. And if it's affecting our veterans, we can no longer say we stand up for our veterans, if we don't stand up for the social inequalities and equities that they face when they get out of the military, especially so many people join the military as a way out of their neighborhoods. But then when they get out of the military, they go back to those same neighborhoods. So what we did at U.S.VETS is had the conversation. We continue to have the conversation. We're looking at how we do diversity training and not just allow it to be something that comes up when a tragic accident happens. We're ensuring we're partnering with agencies that want to be at the forefront and say, we want to take this topic on and start hiring people and giving opportunity and access to these programs so people can move forward. And we all can wrap our heads around that no veteran can suffer discrimination in the same country that he or she was once asked to defend. So if we can wrap our heads around that, it brings everyone together on a unified front to serve this and address those type of issues.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with us. I'd like to open up to our friends in the press today. Like what's on your minds, or what questions do you have for our subject matter experts here on when it comes to homeless veterans, or how COVID's impacting them? What might lie ahead in 2021 for this community?
Joe, can I ask Mr. Peck? He spoke about the West Los Angeles VA. They still have the tent sitting on the grounds there. Are you involved in that? What's going to happen to that? Is the VA going to close that down next year, or what's the status?
So when COVID hit, everyone realized that we need to get as many homeless people off the streets as we can. And they felt that there may be, this pandemic may really run amok in homeless communities. Ultimately, that did not happen, but because people were asking the VA or telling the VA that they needed to do something, they did open a tent city. Now, there are 2 tent cities out there. There's one on the outside of the grounds. It's an independent, a group of veterans, more or less a protest against the VA because they didn't feel the VA was doing enough. The VA subsequently opened their own tent city. They've got about 50 or 60 veterans in there. There's also a bridge home in there with another 50 or 60 veterans. And we are developing the housing. All of us are unhappy at how long it's going to take to develop this permanent housing. We're going to break ground on the first building this month, but it will be an 18-month build. So the VA is now.
I'm sorry, Mr. Peck, is that on the grounds of the West LA VA?
On the ground. So if you're familiar with that, it's the largest VA in the country. It's 300 acres. The northern part of that, about 180 acres, has been largely abandoned for decades, literally. So we're going to rehabilitate those buildings and build some additional buildings to create about 1,600 units of housing. But the VA is considering now doing more in an immediate sense, looking at creating more tent cities. Now, I made the point to them, they're still homeless. If they're in a tent, they're still homeless. But they are working with them. They're giving them meals. Their social workers are visiting them every day. A number of them are transferring to other programs, to U.S.VETS or to other permanent housing programs. So it's what they can do now. They're just, those buildings, as some people think they should just move them into the buildings. The buildings are not habitable. There's asbestos in there. There's all kinds of stuff in there. So they're wondering, they're pondering at this point what else they can do to get more homeless vets off the street.
I'm sorry, just one more, Mr. Peck. Would that be permanent housing on the grounds of the VA, West LA? Would that be the first facility on the grounds of any VA facility in the country?
No, there are a couple of other examples. Chicago has done it. Somewhere else in the Midwest has done it, not to this scale. There's one, perhaps two buildings on VA land in various parts of the country, but nothing at this scale, nothing like 1,600 units of housing. And it's a complex job on a good day. The infrastructure, the funding that will be required to raise, we are raising the funding, not the VA. We're doing all kinds of things that previously were not allowable on VA land. So it's a real stretch. We're knocking down those barriers one by one, talking with Washington, talking with Sacramento, everyone who can help us. Everyone wants it to happen. It's challenging. It's going to be a real challenge.
Steve, thanks for that. And Rich, thanks for your question. Leo, Tara, Abby, Noel, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question just about to Steve and to Susie's comments about the isolation and the challenges with COVID there. So when we get past this, if we get past this, what kind of after effects do we see? I mean, if these folks are usually reintegrating and meeting folks and building that, I mean, are we just pushing a timeline back of them actually being able to reintegrate, back 9 months or a year, or have you been able to find ways to at least get some of that process going?
We're still taking in. I'm gonna start, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Darryl, who is really doing more of the day to day. We're still taking veterans in if they will come. Our permanent housing beds are largely full because they're in a single room. We're taking in all those veterans off the street who will come in. But you're right, it's just pushing off the inevitable. We've, over the last 25 years, we've managed to drive the homeless veteran population down by about 85%. We're kind of stuck at this, 40,000 nationally. In Los Angeles alone, there are 4,000 veterans. We're kind of stuck there. And that requires to us to kind of rethink this, more permanent housing, more employment assistance, more mental health. All of those safety net systems need to be built up so that we don't continue to suffer with this problem. But Darryl can add a little bit to that.
Briefly, just before COVID, during COVID, after COVID, one of the biggest answers is a lack of affordable housing, and poverty is which causes homelessness amongst everyone, and especially including veterans. During this process, there's been a moratorium across the nation, I think, as far as I know, in most states on evictions. Landlords are less skeptical to rent to people at this point. While we want to fight against people being evicted, it's also made people more skeptical in serving those marginalized populations. So it's going to be even more challenging to find housing that we can do. U.S.VETS has usually tackled this in a couple of two ways. One is we do master leasing. So what we do is we go to a homeland landlord and say, we will rent this apartment from you, and you will let us sublease it to someone else. The landlords are more apt to rent to us than they are to the veteran because we're a company. And therefore we have control of that unit. In most of our agencies, most of our areas, we have a high cost market and we have a low inventory. California, Hawaii, those places are very expensive. So when there's an affordable unit that opens up, there's a line down the road, and they're not usually going to pick the veteran that may have some credit problems, some financial problems, or may have a subsidy, but they will rent to us. And then if somebody doesn't make it in that unit, guess what? The unit still stays in our name. We can rent it to the next person. We have over 200 across the nation area now. So to answer your direct question, it has put things on the back burner in terms of access, but it hasn't stopped us to try to continue to engage with landlords virtually and give the services to make sure that people are prepared to move out, and also prepare for those that may have to be evicted or save them from eviction, so we can start working that system back up and building that rapport. We're using this time to talk to landlords and build that relationship so we can continue to be ready to roll when COVID moves on.
Thanks for that. Susie, did you have anything to add?
No, except that I think that we also need to begin thinking about the future. Not everyone who went to war in 2000 was 18 years old. There were some people who were much older, and now 20 years later, they're elderly and becoming elderly, and we have no place to send people in Florida. I mean, if you do not get a certain amount of money, the VA is not
30%.
right. Yeah,
Everything's 30%.
everything is 30% of what they make, and it's just not enough money because there are no homes for people, say, with early onset Alzheimer's. That's a problem we have right now with someone. We're trying to find him a house. The VA told us it was 2 to 3 years before they could get him into any place. You see what I mean? So we need to be forward thinking. Everyone, we do need the better housing. I totally agree. But these are combat veterans, and it may have happened to them because of something that happened in combat, and there still is no place for them. All our VA domiciliaries and other type housing, where they have medical attention are just stuffed. I mean, you can't get another person in. The last I heard, Florida was 1,200 beds short for the Vietnam veterans. Yeah, and that was last year or year before last, I'm sorry. And I don't know how far they've come because money is so tight, but this is going to be an issue in the future, whether we like it or not. And I think we need to start thinking about it. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Oh.
Tara, did you have any questions or?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of questions on the West Los Angeles project. Once the unit is built and it's, a normal day-to-day operation, will those operational costs be something the VA is going to fund year after year, or are you going to have to fundraise to keep it going? And what will be the long-term agreement there?
So they gave us the land, but not the money.
Yeah,
said, "Here you go."
That sounds right.
So we're going to have to fundraise. The construction cost alone on the 10-year project is towards $900 million. Each of the buildings that we build, so the first building, for instance, that'll break ground this month is 60 units. One of our partners, Thomas Safran Associates, is developing the building. U.S.VETS is providing the services. We also have VASH vouchers. Is everyone familiar with VASH vouchers? No, so VA supported housing. It's a Section 8 voucher along with case management assistance from the VA, both of those things together. So we've got 58 VASH vouchers in that building. So we'll have case management services. U.S.VETS will have to augment that. That is kind of a 8:30 to 4:30 window that the VA provides services. We provide the wraparound overnight, after hours, and we'll have to go out and fundraise for that. And that'll be the same for every building on campus. There'll be some VA assistance through the VASH vouchers, which pays the rent, but and some services, but we'll have to augment that. So we got into this knowing that this would be a huge task, but it needed to be done, and we felt we were the best people to do it. So we're really grateful that we got that opportunity.
Okay, and then as a follow-up, Joe, when you were talking earlier about the camp in Phoenix, and you mentioned, if they don't move on, they get an option of $100 and a bus ticket to San Diego. I was wondering if you're kind of speaking glibly there, or there's really, is there a policy in some of these communities to just push veterans out? And should there maybe be a consideration of different types of policy by either state houses or Congress that, you can't just evict a homeless veteran?
Yeah, and to clarify, I did not double check that with the city of Phoenix, but this is exactly what the veterans were telling us, and was confirmed by some of the local veteran advocacy group that showed up on site. That's what they told us. So I think we would definitely need to double check that, but I did get that firsthand from people who were in that homeless encampment. So I
can add to that a little bit. There's that was happening in Orange County, which is directly south of LA County, a county that traditionally has not been friendly to homeless people. And there's 5 or 6 cities in Orange County that literally were doing that, pushing people around. Here, you go over to Santa Ana, or go over to Highland Park, wherever. And a judge, another Marine, I'm glad to say, Judge Carter, passed, brought all of those mayors in and wagged his finger at them and says, "If I hear you doing this one more time, I'm going to arrest you." So I'm going to take the sheriff's. So it is happening. But people know it's happening now, and they are less likely to do it because of the advocacy groups Joe mentioned, and we're one of them. Says you can't do that. If you can't just push them out of the city. You need to find them someplace to go. We have the same rules as Susie. Guys have got to cooperate, right? Guys can't come in and wreak havoc in our communities. So they really have to be proactively moving forward. If they can't do that, we're going to exit them, but we're going to exit them to someplace else. We're going to find another program that'll take them.
Same thing.
Susie, did you see anything similar in Florida, or?
Oh, yes. There used to be cities that would just give them bus tickets. Several times we've gotten, a little cutout from the newspaper. If you're homeless, contact this number. We'll get you a ticket down to Florida. It's cold up here. It's crazy, but it's true. And I can't blame those cities because homelessness has become such a problem. I mean, I can blame them, but they should do something about it. We were trying to assist St. Augustine, which is south of Jacksonville, in possibly opening a veteran center, and they now have turned similar to ours because they have a terrible problem down there. But if you talk to them, they don't have a problem, which is interesting too. They take them across the I-95 and drop them off in a field, just like what you saw in Phoenix. It's terrible, and we're trying to get them interested in doing something like this. And so far, they are also talking to the VA, and the VA may, from what I understand, help them, which would be great. We just need to find places to help these people.
Yeah, and I think, Tara, one of the things that struck me is when I was asking a lot of the vets that we ran into in that encampment why they didn't go seek the assistance of the Phoenix homeless shelter, they're like, well, a lot of us have substance use disorder issues, and we do not feel safe at the Phoenix Municipal Homeless Center. You said because that's where drug dealers hang out too, and
right, exactly. You're right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. That's the way it is here too. So
yeah, they were concerned about physical safety. They were concerned about access to illicit substances. And what was really interesting, another thing that struck me when Verna and I rolled up on that camp, right? We called the local reporter, found out where their location was, rolled up there. We were met by an Army veteran who's like, I'm the chief of security, right? Like, we met a quartermaster. We saw the supply depot. I mean, they, even in their challenged state, right? A lot of them still struggling with PTSD, substance use, alcoholism, all sorts of stuff. They had a military style organization built into that camp. And I'd say they even had other homeless people who were just civilians who weren't veterans, were living with them just because they saw organization, camaraderie, a sense of order, and some semblance of safety. But it was just a tremendously interesting experience. If you ever have a chance to go to see something like that, it is well worth your time. And the stories are just amazing.
We're just about to move into a new building in Phoenix. We have about 130 veterans in the building that we're in. We're losing our lease. That was full all the time. So I'm guessing our outreach worker encountered that camp, but we're moving into a new building that will give us, I think, 40 or 60 new units of permanent, additionally as a permanent housing. So I'm hoping that that sense of safety is critical. That's the main thing we do at all of our sites is create that sense of safety so that they can move forward.
Yeah, that's the big thing is as long as they have a nice, safe place to lay their head.
And a place to regain their dignity. My
And
God,
especially
what is the Marine Corps' big thing? I mean,
pride,
right? And can you imagine, and I know you understand everyone here, you lose that because for no other reason than you don't know, you've got a mental health issue. I mean, you have to it's slow, but you have to get your dignity back before you
Yeah.
can do anything. It's absolutely.
Definitely.
You have to fix you before anything else.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
That's
Take
a great-
care of-
That's a great point. Noel, did you have any questions?
Yeah, Joe, thank you so much for including me. And I have a question for you or for any of the other experts that you've gathered here, which is if an individual veteran or family member of someone who's homeless now comes forward and says, how can we get, my family member off the street? Look, he really needs a place to live, or someone who's in fear of being evicted in the next couple of months. Is there some organization, some phone number that would be a good clearinghouse, a good starting point to deal with individual problems?
Well, in Florida, am I allowed to talk, or do you want? I mean, in Florida, they have started something called Mission United, which is United Way is actually the lead on it, but they have a special number they call
The 211.
211, and they tell them that they're a military veteran, and they switch them to a line that helps them figure out, do they need money? Do they need housing? Do they need mental health? And it's become very effective. We've had them refer, it just opened here in Jacksonville about 5 months ago. And we've had them refer at least one person a month to us. So that gives you an idea of.
We actually had a veteran who was here who
And one of our
graduated,
veterans,
is working there.
yeah, he's one of their case managers now, and he's doing a fantastic job. And that's what they're doing. They're hiring veterans because veterans understand veterans.
Wow.
Nice.
But
There's
that's
also a national organization, National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, which is a really good national resource. They know probably 95% of all of the veteran serving organizations in the country, and they're listed on their website.
Yeah.
And more communities are creating these kinds of offices and backbone organizations that we're trying to get to the point where you call one number in a community,
Exactly.
and they'll have access to all of the resources.
Yeah, for the members of the press, if you haven't run into their executive director over at the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, a woman named Kat Monet, just an amazing advocate on this issue. So I'm in touch with her if ever you need to contact her as well. What other questions do we have? I know we're kind of pushing up on the top of the hour. We're at 46 minutes in, so.
Oh, Joe, could I just ask one more of Mr. Peck? You mentioned Judge Carter in LA.
Yes.
He was, I was in his TBS class at
Holy cow.
Wow.
I really didn't know him, but Dave, everything I've heard about Dave is an outstanding individual. And what is the status of that case that was before him? Is that still ongoing or what?
He did a couple of things. He really got the Orange County communities to create homeless shelters, each of them. It took a long time, but ultimately I think he was largely successful. They brought him up to Los Angeles after COVID hit. And because, as I said, they were very, very afraid that this pandemic would rage through the communities. So they put porta potties in sanitation stations throughout all the homeless communities. He then, in looking at that situation, found that a number of veterans during COVID and before COVID as well were sleeping under freeway overpasses, and the pollution there is significant. You do that too long, and you're going to damage your lungs. He ordered the city to move all those people near the freeways out. They're struggling with how to do that. It was a tall order, but that's what Judge Carter does. I think he's awesome. He was actually mentored by our founder, Judge Harry Pregerson. So they are two peas in a pod, and Judge Carter does not mince words. He just ordered them to get them away from the freeway. They're trying to figure it out. The LA County has bought, I believe, 4 or 5 old motels to move homeless people into.
Yeah, so
they're in process. It is a massive undertaking. I think there were about 7,000 homeless people living near the freeway. So they've not solved it yet, but they're working on it, and I guarantee you he's going to revisit that every once in a while.
Joe, he was 26 Marines, so case on.
Really? Wow. No,
Wow.
he's really something. I really admire him. He is a no-nonsense guy.
That's awesome. What other questions do we have? I had one. If the press doesn't have any, I was just wondering, are you seeing an increase in substance use disorder in light of COVID? You know, as far as are because of the stress of the pandemic, are you seeing a spike in that at all, or no?
Darryl, have you heard?
Yes, most definitely. We do while we have zero tolerance for drug and alcohol use on campus, we do have a harm reduction model when it comes to people that are self-medicating for obvious reasons, and we increase the treatment. And when COVID first came, we went into 3 steps of 1, safety, which meant services came to almost cease to exist except for shelter, taking care of yourself as we learned about the disease. We are now in the recovery stage. So now we're going to start discovering those things that were happening that we may or may not have taken place because it was deteriorating over time. As substance abuse is a progressive disorder, it will continue to get worse over time.
Yeah.
So now we're in recovery stages. We're holding classes, and people, because we have an environment of being a very veteran-centered, holistic approach and not punitive, we want to make sure that the veteran comes clean. Hey, this is what I've been doing. This is what I'm working on, so we can address that issue. So
Yeah.
to answer your question is yes, we've seen an increase, but it's been more increase of self-discovery, not an increase that we walked in and had to put people out they were using on campus. We have not experienced that for the most part because they've been sheltering in place too, but alcohol mostly you're seeing an increase in, and we've been allowed to address that recovery and get them back into treatment and back on the horse. And of course, before COVID or after COVID, you're going to have some successes. You're going to have others that are not ready. Our job is to take it one step further, and maybe the next time they'll get it, and the next time they'll get it, and you just have to stay on it and continue to do it. So the answer is yes, but we've been more inviting of tell us the problem and let us help you without jeopardizing your housing right now, because it was nothing that they did punitive. It didn't cause a array, because that would happen anyway if that happened. So
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks for that. That question came in through the chat. Any last questions from members of the press before we wrap? No? Okay, awesome. Hey, well, we really appreciate your time and your interest and engagement on this important topic. I see Susie has her email address up in her name on the screen. Steve and Darryl, if our friends in the press would like to get a hold of you after this, how can they find you?
Our website is USVETS.org. Really easy, and we're both on there. So our national office will answer the phone and get you to where you need to go.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. This is an issue, like I said, near and dear to my heart. And thank you, Steve, Darryl, and Susie, for the good work that your organizations do on a daily basis. And we couldn't be more proud to be partnered with you in this work. So, so thank you, everyone. If anyone has any follow-up questions, please send them to Tanisha. She'll get them staffed around to Steve and Susie and Darryl for their. We'll just connect you via an email and have them respond directly to you. But this is the first of a series that we're doing on our 2020 grantees. So look for January, February timeframe. We'll be doing more of these with the press on different issues that we are engaged with collaborative grants with other organizations on. So thanks for attending. I'd appreciate any feedback you have on.
Joe, while we're here, hi, Tara. Haven't seen anybody in a long time.
It's awesome. No, I do miss those serendipitous moments where we're at different events in the city and all run into each other. So hopefully with a vaccine coming quickly, we'll be back to in-person interaction in the future. But I wish all of you a very happy holidays and a healthier and a better 2021. So thanks everyone, and we really appreciate you coming today.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.